I was going to talk about Qantas announcing another huge loss today and ask Terry McCrann on to talk about that. But something that Andrew Colonel just said before the break really disturbs me. Now, as you know, we were talking about the ACTU, the overall union organisation, saying it wants to go way back to the past, 40, 50 years ago, when unions could run wage campaigns affecting lots of businesses at once. No more this new style we have of negotiating business by business, workers with bosses, right? So it's a tailor-made thing. No, one size fits all. And the Prime Minister today, and this is the frightening bit, said he wasn't ruling that out. And Andrew Colonel told me that he'd actually run this by a senior minister, told me just after we got off air there, who also wouldn't rule it out. Also wouldn't rule that out. And I'm just thinking, hello, is this actually the agenda after all? Joining me is Terry McCrann, Australia's top finance writer and with the Herald Sun. Terry, thanks for joining me. Could this really, truly be Labor's plan, a return to almost industry-wide bargaining? And what would that actually do to us?
Well, it's certainly the union plan, Andrew, and what we see is Sally McManus trying to make the ACTU in particular, but unions more broadly, relevant again, because the impact of the union movement outside the public sector and construction, where the CMFEMEU are so powerful, they've shrunk to such a small size in the workforce. This is about making the unions central, and it's also obviously about imposing one size fits all, as you've indicated, outcomes across a business sector, across the economy. And it's ultimately about really having wages catch inflation. What really disturbed me about the Prime Minister's comments is that he didn't seem to understand that by not ruling this out, he was effectively endorsing the idea that wages should chase inflation, because he said the enterprise bargaining process isn't working because it isn't delivering wage increases that keep up with inflation. In fact, enterprise bargaining is working, because unless you get the productivity which pays for those wage increases, you can't simply expect business to write another big cheque on a higher wage, simply because that's what the inflation numbers are. That is not only a way to bankrupt business, but it's a way to lock in very high inflation. And by locking in very high inflation, we know where that would lead. It would lock in very high interest rates. So you are very right to be very concerned about the way the summit is now developing. I'd like to say, let's hope it ends up as a talk fest, that we don't actually see the union movement getting this idea fed out into the broader community.
Well, it ties in with something you've written about in your column that really struck me too. We've seen the Albanese government say no to the banks going to this summit, but yes to the super funds, many of which have strong union ties. And now we hear, 2 days ago, the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, saying he actually wants super funds to have a greater involvement in energy transition and the funding of affordable housing. He says, what else can we responsibly do on climate financing, energy transition? Wants super money, people's retirement incomes, into this highly speculative green energy stuff. And for all I know, getting the government to, if not mandate it, at least help the transition. Mate, this is looking more and more like a socialist agenda.
Well, it's certainly looking like the family coming together for a meeting, Andrew. Unions in the form of unions as the major factor in industry super, and of course the Labor Party, which is an outgrowth of the union movement. So I think the business sector should be very concerned that they are going to go there to the summit basically as patsies for a meeting within the union family, which will lead to outcomes which they will find very unpleasant and which will not be very good for the broader economy.
Yes, of course, though, but how many of them have drunk the global warming Kool-Aid? I have no respect for some of the,
on global warming,
top business leaders. Yeah, well, well, you know.
Well, exactly.
But I want to quickly, I don't know how much time we've got left, but I do want to talk to you about a couple of the profit results that are now coming out at the end of the financial year, because these could really affect us. First of all, Qantas announcing another massive loss, $860 million net. But on the bright side, that was just half the loss of the year before. What does this mean for the company, but more importantly, for Australians who need to fly?
Well, very quickly, Andrew, it's surprising that Qantas is still flying, that Qantas is not only still a viable business, but it's valued at the share market at around $9 billion. The two big numbers that were really shocking was that over the course of COVID, the shutdowns cost Qantas $25 billion in revenue, and its total losses added up to $7 billion. Those are just staggering figures.
Wow.
And, you know, it's staggering that they've come out the other side still a viable business. So I think going forward, Qantas is in very good shape considering the punishment that it took over the 2 years of COVID.
And more importantly, I think for many Australians will be where they feel inflation worse, right, is when they shop for their groceries. Now, Coles and Woolies have both posted healthy profits. They're up. But what does this mean for shoppers over the next year?
Well, again, the important number in the Woolworths and Coles numbers was that in-store inflation. Now, many of your viewers will say, I'm sure it's much higher than this, but in-store inflation is 4 to 5% in Coles, a little less in Woolworths. This is the first time we've seen that sort of inflation inside the supermarkets for a very long time. And it's only going to get worse when we get into 2023. So what it means for shoppers, obviously, is more pain when they go to the supermarket to add to the pain which they get when they fill up their car. And we're about to see the 24-cent petrol price per litre increase come back when we get the end of the holiday on the excise from the previous government.
Yes, but let's all call the Royal Commission into what Scott Morrison once did. This is just, this is, of course, the more important thing. Honestly, Terry McCrann, I just wonder what's going on. Thank you so much for your time.